GM, everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today is Sunday, the 22nd of December, and let's get straight into the analysis. So as we can see, Bitcoin on the 4 hour here, consolidating. It's come back down a little bit, coming down to 96,000 and starting to pop back up today. So obviously it's the weekend, volatility is going to be fairly low, and volume is obviously a lot lighter here, and I'm just really expecting no dramatic moves, just really some consolidation, and probably waiting to see what Monday has in store. Obviously we could get some volatility going into the weekly close tonight as well, but Bitcoin really, since the move down, obviously finding support around the 92,000 area. We had a decent reversal on Friday and we popped back above this descending trend line. This was a trend line that I drew on from the hourly. So just going down to a lower time frame here to kind of see, we had that breakout, we had the retest. Now we seem to be finding a little bit more support. So Bitcoin looking fairly constructive. And I think probably from here, we look to make a push back up. Potentially, I think we could go as high as 101,000. Maybe we come a little bit higher into 102,000. But I'm thinking if Bitcoin can get its way back up to this sort of level around 102,000 and then potentially try and get a higher low in, I think that is probably going to be the best case scenario from here for Bitcoin. If we just look at the liquidation heat map, so this is over the last 24 hours, really liquidations appearing both sides. I would think that after we came down, and obviously we took out the highest liquidations down at 96,000 on the downside, now potentially the market will make a run higher, looking to come up to around 99,000. Obviously, move to 99,000 wouldn't really do a lot. It would retest this second parallel ascending trend line here, and it would pretty much be back to the midpoint of our previous range. But if we look at sort of where we've been lately in terms of current range, then the midpoint is coming in just around about just above 100,000. So that wouldn't really do sort of too much for price. It would still be more or less consolidation. If we actually go out onto the weekly, then let's see if this gives us any more information as to where most of the liquidity stacked. And we've got a lot more liquidations above price. So we've got them coming in at 99,000, another band up at around about 103. And then obviously the most are still going to be above the all-time high at around about 108,500 up to 110,000. So there is the potential there for Bitcoin, obviously, to put in a rally, an aggressive rally. If we can get and establish ourselves back above 100,000, potentially we do squeeze on higher here. So I think obviously zooming out and looking at slightly longer time frame on the daily, we've got the big reversal. I would think that at some point Bitcoin is likely to come in and fill in some of this wick. Obviously, this creates inefficiency in the market when you have sort of price action sort of wick down like this. We saw this happen with this wick. We came back, we sort of filled it in. So potentially, I mean, we saw it with this wick as well. We came back, we filled part of it in. So potentially we do come down a bit low and fill this wick in, maybe to this descending trend line. Potentially we go for another swipe lower into this value area down here. I believe this is great value to be accumulating Bitcoin based on the fact we're about to go into 2025 and into the most explosive part of the bull run. I'm obviously looking to add to Bitcoin where I can at a discount. And for me, this would represent a good discount around this ascending trend line. Obviously, this is a longer term ascending trend line that has connected the highs from the previous bull market to the current, both highs in the previous bull markets, obviously just below current price action. So I do think this will be relevant on any move down, and potentially we grab the liquidity below this trend line. So there'll probably be a lot of stops and a lot of liquidity for market makers to grab below this. So potentially I could see it going as low as sort of 86, maybe even 85,000 worst case scenario. Obviously that as a pullback on Bitcoin would be a pullback of about 20%. That seems to be sort of par for the course for this bull run so far. So I don't really see us going much lower than that, mainly because we haven't seen such an extended explosive move. If we just go now onto the weekly, obviously things are getting a bit messy here, but if we look at another Bitcoin weekly chart, we can see that obviously we saw extension for sort of 1 to 3 weeks. We've had a pullback. Now we've seen 2 weeks and we're getting this pullback already. And for me, I'd probably like to see extension for another week or two. I mean, when we got this sort of larger correction in the last bull market, which actually did come in January, we can see that the pullback was about 30%, but we'd be coming off 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks of upside. And that was a good 120% move. So, I mean, after that sort of move, the market is very overheated and we'd expect sort of a big dramatic drop. Obviously, we saw 1, 2, 3 here. And I mean, I guess you could say that barring this hammer candle here, potentially we have seen a good sort of 5 weeks of sort of bullish price action and a 50% move, which is still pretty decent. But I just think probably on the downside, 20%, 25% would be absolute worst case scenario, I think, for me. But I want to see a bit more. I think I think we probably have one more leg up to go before we see a more meaningful or more deeper correction. But I could be proven wrong here. Obviously, in the short term, what I'm really looking for is Bitcoin to come back up, and if it's going to reject from anywhere, I think it will be around 101 to 102,000. I think it'll be in this zone here that's obviously been shaded. I think this is definitely the danger zone for me. We've seen this area around 102,000 pretty difficult for Bitcoin to actually break out from. So that personally, as a trader on the long side, right here, that's in leverage long positions, certainly on a lot of altcoins, that'll probably be the point I de-risk from alts. I probably won't de-risk from Bitcoin here, just because I don't feel like I'm overexposed in Bitcoin longs here. But certainly on some of the altcoins, given the volatility, I think if we do see a push up here, that'll probably be an area I look to de-risk just a little bit. Not everything, I'll still remain long, but I just won't be as overextended as I currently am in the market. I'm not too overextended, but obviously I want to be in a situation where if we do see a retest or a push lower, I actually have some sort of spare capital to be able to deploy. I think that's reasonable. I think that's very sensible. Bitcoin dominance as well has been quite interesting. So obviously we've seen this push up in the Bitcoin dominance during last week, sort of topping out on Friday, just shy of the 786. And we started to now see this come back down and roll over. This looks like potentially could be putting in a lower high from the previous high. And also it looks like we could now have just seen another lower high here on Bitcoin dominance. That'll be confirmed if we get back below 58%. So this is going to be a very key level for Bitcoin to break on the downside to obviously signal strength coming back into altcoins. So that's something I'm going to be looking at closely over the next week. Speaking of altcoins, or should we say other cryptocurrencies, I'd say Ethereum is probably no longer classed as an altcoin, even though it's an alternative to Bitcoin as a crypto, but it's really, for me, an asset in its own respect in terms of being one of the majors. And we've seen Ethereum get very, very close to the discount zone, actually front running that. So that's quite encouraging for me on Ethereum. Ethereum has a bit more work to do to catch up with Bitcoin in terms of on the hourly trends. So we can see these trend lines here starting to converge really this night around sort of call it 3,500. So I'd really like to see Ethereum break through 3,500, 3,550. I think that will initiate a run probably as high as 3,750 to 3,800. I think we could come all the way up and likely sort of back test sort of some of these lows, like I say, 3,000, sort of 3,500, say 30, and then a bit higher. We could kind of run into let's go on the 4 hour to see this a bit clearly. Sort of these sort of lows here, and as high as 3,820, I think is on the cards for Ethereum. I mean, just putting on a Fibonacci retracement, we can kind of see that the 782 lines up around about 3,730. So that could potentially be a target that we look to move to. But yeah, I'm thinking we can come sort of back above. Like obviously, we've retested 3,550 once, I think we can probably push up and go a bit higher here and maybe into the 3,700s, 3,800s. Then I think at that point we'll have to be mindful and wary of a potential sort of lower high resulting in a reversal, maybe a higher low on Ethereum, and potentially we just get this sort of sideways consolidation and chop into the start of January, potentially another fake lower, and then we start to see a real markup into the middle of January. I really think by mid-January, things will be looking a lot better and will be a lot closer back to all-time highs, potentially Ethereum being back above this descending trend line and testing 4,000 again. That hasn't really changed in terms of an outlook. Solana also has been fairly weak. It has dropped into that value area. So I am looking for Solana to get its way out of here quickly to close this week above this 192. Obviously, weekly closes anywhere below this descending trend line will start to run a risk that we've seen a big deviation here. And actually, Solana might be in for lower prices over the next few days. So, yes, I do want to see Solana sort of push back up and have a strong weekly close. Obviously, I'd like to see the same thing happen on Ethereum. If we just look at Solana on the weekly, it's probably sort of best to do if looking for the weekly close. We can see that, yeah, Solana currently at its zero point 0.5. So we really want to hold above that and this descending trend line this week. And ideally, we want to get back above $200, but obviously anything can happen. That might be a lot to ask for, but I would say any closes above sort of $202 would start to look, I'd say, good on Solana. Otherwise, we have to be playing a little bit defensively over the next few days. Pepe as well. We really want to see this that Pepe hold its previous all-time high on a weekly close. Right now, it's doing so. Obviously, Pepe coming sort of not back into its value area, but dipping below that prior all-time high again and finding some support. So that's fairly encouraging. Like I say, Bitcoin dominance is falling today, so expecting alts might get a little bit of a bounce over the next few days. Pepe just going sort of down to a lower term time frame. Let's actually stick it back onto the 4 hour. We can see we've got this descending trend line in play here. Let's just tidy that up slightly. So really Pepe waiting for the breakout of this descending trend line to get a bit more bullish. And that doesn't necessarily mean we're going to rally straight back onto new all-time highs when these trends do break. Obviously, we got something sort of similar, I think, on Solana as well. So Solana needs to get back above these trend lines. I also put in this sort of diagonal here, which has just been a bit of an inflection point for bounces and rejections. So I'd really like to see Solana reclaim, call it sort of $204, $206 to get a bit more bullish. Something else I wanted to talk about was moving averages as well. So just something interesting. If I put these moving averages on, I think it was on the weekly, we can see here that Solana has come down and it's bounced almost perfectly off its 20-week moving average. Ethereum here getting very close to its 50-week moving average. So I think and Bitcoin is still well extended above its all of its weekly moving averages. So this is why I'm saying there's potential for Bitcoin not necessarily to come all the way down and retest this moving average, but to come a little bit further down, obviously fill in a little bit this open gap, a little bit this sort of airspace here. But Ethereum, I mean, a lot of the times this is what we see. We see a strong push higher and then a push down into the moving averages, find some of those moving averages as support and hold them and then start to mark on up. And if we look at the previous sort of bull run for Ethereum, I mean, we're going all the way back to sort of early 2021. And we can see that Ethereum, when it's sort of, where are we? So it'll be late 2020. We can see Ethereum actually never really came back down and retested its longer term moving averages. It was actually a lot more bullish back then. It's also 16%. And this one here, I think, was also about sort of 24%. So it saw a few sort of bigger sort of moves down and sell-offs, but it never ever really like saw massive. Trying to think where we are here. So December 2020. So we never really saw sort of massive sort of moves sort of back to the moving averages in the last time. So that's what I'm thinking. Like we might not get all the way down here to all of these moving averages on Ethereum. Solana, I don't really think we've got sort of that much history. If we go back to sort of 2020, it'll be. I mean, there wasn't really much going on there. Just back on Ethereum, like I say, back in 2020, this is where I want to get to, December 2020. Um, and in fact, it was yeah, it was more around here. We never really saw much in terms of a retest of moving averages. The last one we saw was back in September, which was in the summer. But like we can see, we did have some sort of 33%. Um, maybe easier to see this on the daily. If this is going to work. No, it's not going to. But what I'm trying to say is, look, it's likely we see some retests. Obviously, Ethereum right now is also coming down and retesting some of its daily moving averages as well. So it's coming to like its 100-day moving average. Solana is below most of it, but it's got its 200-day coming up to support around about 168 there. And Bitcoin, in terms of its daily moving averages, started to find support on its 50-day moving average. So yeah, just some interesting sort of observations on the MAs there. Starting to see some of these markets, especially Ethereum and Solana, come back into some of their sort of weekly, sort of longer term moving averages and start to find support, which is fairly encouraging. I think the final thing to look at that I wanted to touch upon was also the total market cap. So if we're just looking at total market cap in terms of the entire crypto space, we can see that we've practically just made a all-time high retest from the previous bull run. So I don't think there's a massive amount to be concerned about here. Of course, we could come down, we could sort of grind into this around sort of like 2.95 and 3 trillion just to sort of give us a full-on sort of proper deeper retest. And I think for me, that is not really a worst case scenario, but that is a highly probable scenario that would actually call for a lower high being put in and then a little bit more of a bleed, a little bit more of downside. But I expect this will happen very, very quickly. I fully expect that come, like I say, a month's time, we'll be pushing up again. So it's just really, do we see another flush down over the next week? Obviously, from the current low, a flush down, for example, to 295 would be about another 3%. We're not talking about massive moves. We're talking about potentially another sort of 2 to 3% drop on Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, maybe doing 4 or 5% drop. Obviously, this will include everything, I believe, Tether as well. So obviously the stable coins are a big part of this. So maybe Bitcoin does sort of 3 or 4%, Ethereum does sort of 5 or 6%. Obviously for Bitcoin, just looking at what that would do from the current low, get the scale on this chart sorted out, then from the current low, like another sort of 3 or 4% sort of take us into those high 80s, sort of 88K, 89K. Potentially we sort of come a little bit lower to 87. So like I say, that would be all sort of fair game for me when it comes to Bitcoin and Ethereum, another sort of 5 6% or so sort of take us really down close to that sort of 3,000 level, just below that 3,000 level. And that would pretty much be testing these sort of lows here back from earlier on in the year, quite a key level here at around this sort of 2,800, 2,900. So that would take us into that level where I think there would be a huge amount of demand coming in for Ethereum and Solana. Potentially that would take us into around about, I think that would be around about sort of 165. Solana's obviously already been really beaten up, but yeah, around sort of into the 160s. And obviously, we just spoken about this is an area that we also have our sort of 200-day moving average, which Solana does like to base off when it is sort of trending bullish. So yeah, what can I say? I think there's probably enough confidence on some of these charts now with certain regions to say that, look, these areas could soon get hit. And if they do get hit, we'd be expecting to see probably a bigger reaction than the reaction we just got. I think that would probably be sufficient to put in a low. So, like I say, we're not completely out of the woods yet. This could be the low for Bitcoin. These could be the lows for Ethereum and Solana. Obviously, if these markets want to go turbo bullish next month, for me, it makes sense to look to front run some of the market participants and not actually reach some of our sort of final or lower targets on these moves. So potentially that is how things play out. We're going to be taking it day by day. And yeah, we still have bullish catalysts. We still have MicroStrategy joining the NASDAQ on Monday. So potentially that could be a catalyst for a bit of a Monday bounce. Potentially then we see more downside after that. But I think, look, just don't get carried away. Don't get carried away chasing pumps here. Let's keep things a little bit defensive for, I'd say, the next couple of weeks. Anything's possible. Like I say, Bitcoin still could drop a little bit lower. So could Ethereum, Solana. Obviously, this would send down the altcoins a little bit lower too. So, but I expect that will come in, like I say, over the next 1 to 2 weeks. And then I think we're going to be in the clear. So just really survive these next 1 to 2 weeks is my message. And I think good times will be back with us very, very soon. So I'm going to leave it there. Thank you very much for watching. If you have enjoyed this one, please do like, comment, subscribe, do what you need to do. Please do interact and help support the channel. And I'll be back with you same place, same time tomorrow for the Monday stream. Let's go. Okay. GM.